Exactly. Just take action was the real thing that I kept thinking to myself. You know, if I keep taking action, small little action each day, and buy something, then because I was doing a lot of analysis, but I think the first time I took action, they're like, wow, this really excites me. And so I wanted to keep doing that. So that was a key, I think.
I'm Drew Brenneman, and this is the Rise and Invest podcast. I bought my first 2 properties as a 19-year-old with my own money that I earned from an online business I started in high school. I've now grown my portfolio from that first duplex to hundreds of millions of dollars of investment property. My goal with this show is to give you the resource I wanted when I first started out. Subscribe to our podcast where I break down real-life stories, tactics, strategies, and current market information you need to be a successful investor. Welcome to the Rise and Invest podcast. I'm your host, Drew Brenneman. Before we get rolling here today, just want to remind everybody to like, subscribe, leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Just really helps others hear about the podcast. Guest today is Mike Hennig. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. Yeah, Mike's a part-time real estate investor, but his portfolio size is anything but part-time. He's got about $10 million of properties and wanted to bring him on and hear how he was able to do this while working a full-time job.
Absolutely, Drew. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. And cool. I think too, one thing I want to mention before we get like fully rolling here is just, we have a ton of written content on our website. So we have like some information on the outro about this, but too, just want to bring it up at the start here where we have our blog on the website. And we actually just put out a new article pretty recently about what the Fed funds rate increase means for mortgages. And it works differently than a lot of people think. It's not just like, okay, they raised the rate 75 bips and then your mortgage goes up 75. It actually works differently. So we wanted to kind of write about how that all works. So we just recently put that out. And then we have a bunch of other written content on there. So go check it out. The website is riseinvest.com. So with that out of the way, let's get started.
Excellent.
Great. Well, yeah. So then maybe let's just start with what you do for a day job, just to give this some context.
Yeah. So I work for a company called Gallup, and you may have heard of the Gallup poll, for example. So it's that same company, and we do polling sort of, and analytics and research around the world, around the country. I specifically work at the part of the business that works with organizations. So we will measure sentiment for employees at an organization around their engagement, well-being, burnout, and then provide insights back to the organization on how their people are feeling. So that's the majority of what I do there. And we have some other products that we sell, like Clifton Strengths, which I know you guys use a similar thing when you're hiring, just to get the sense of what makes up a person's makeup, for example. So that's my day job.
Nice.
At Gallup. Yeah.
Yeah. So then if you're doing that, then kind of what was the thought behind getting started going in real estate investing?
Yeah. So I've actually been investing since really 2007, 2008. And really I was in college and I was living with 9 other guys, and we each had a room in this house with 9 bedrooms, and we're each paying like $375 for our room, which was fine for, an individual. But I'm thinking to myself, man, this guy's making 9 times $375. It's like $3,400 a month in rent. And I looked up the price of the house, and it was like $45,000 in South Bend, Indiana. And so I thought about that, and that kind of got me thinking, man, this guy's making a ton of money. His mortgage is probably like $300, and the rest is all profit. And it's not like he was fixing things in our house either whenever we had issues. So that was kind of my first interest. And then of course I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and started to think, man, I kind of want to, move this direction, get involved in real estate. So that's kind of how I started thinking about it.
Nice. Was that the first book you read on investing then, or?
It was, yeah. Rich Dad, Poor Dad was the first book I read. It really got me interested in the mindset. And I did read some other books kind of leading up there, but that was definitely the one that got me at first interested.
And then that you read in college, or like how old were you?
Yeah, I read in college. Like while I was living in this house. And then I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to start to take, my first steps towards investing after that.
Yeah. So that planted the seed in your head.
Yes.
And then how long after that? Like, so what were your sort of next steps from there?
So I graduated in May of 2007, and I got a job in consulting for Deloitte Consulting, and so I was going to be on the road Monday through Thursday, and so I thought to myself, I can just live at my parents' house and buy a rental. And that's basically what I did. I knew the South Bend market, which is where I'd gone to school, I'd gone to college there. And so I was looking for houses in South Bend, and I found one that I was thinking about this. I believe the purchase price was $98,000. And I just knew knew that I wasn't going to live there because I was going to be traveling to my clients Monday through Thursday. And so I bought it with like an FHA loan, newly graduated, no money, but I could afford 3% down my first couple paychecks. And then I closed on it in October of 2007.
Nice. And then, and with that FHA loan, it was going to be owner occupied.
Correct. Yep. Exactly.
Nice.
So, I was going to move in there and lived there for like a month and then rent it out basically. So.
Okay. Nice. And then that was on campus then
It was just off campus. Yeah. Great location, just like basically southwest of the campus.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. That's a common thing I've noticed where I got none of them are, let's say, we'll call it part-time like you are, but they, buddies who were working in real estate, doing something, lender, what have you, and then made a jump to full-time investing. And a lot of them did something similar where if you're just spending all your money, you're not able to like save up to invest. So then they did the same thing.
Yeah.
Where they lived at home or, did something with 9 roommates as an adult still, and then finally gave it up when, someone wouldn't let them or something. So nice. Well, so then you got started right away, basically.
Yeah,
so.
I got started right away, and that first deal went pretty well. And I found over the course of obviously 2008, 2009, prices started coming down. That first deal I still own it, and it's doing well. But some of the other deals, I bought probably 3 or 4 more single family houses in South Bend, more around the prices of like the house I was living in, like the $45,000-$50,000 prices, even $40,000. And at the time, lenders would lend on it, so I would put, even 20% down, and I get a loan for $25,000 and for 30 years. So,
yeah, and then what kind of cash flow would be on that? Because those are good numbers with how inexpensive they are relative to the rents.
Yeah, so I tried to do the college rental thing for a little while to rent to students, and I ran into some issues where, I would have 3 people that were locked in to live there, each paying by the room. And then they would email me right before school started saying they got in a fight and they don't want to live together. And so they wanted to break their lease. And so I ended up going just with local families. But I could still rent out these houses I would buy for $45,000 for like $800, $850.
Nice.
So it's like 25% return.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a really low gross rent multiplier. That's like
yes.
a 5 doing that just in my head. But there'd be a lot of cash flow on that.
Exactly.
Those first deals I did in Madison, similar, but the prices for what the rents were in Madison, Wisconsin were like double that.
Yeah.
Like 10 GRMs.
Okay.
So not as much cash flow, still a fair amount, but yeah, that's nice because then that's all like cash flow driven or not so much about appreciation or.
Exactly.
Nice.
And for me, I think the other thing that was important to me, I knew really young, just graduated college, have my salary, but the numbers weren't so big that if I made a mistake on a $50,000 house, it's like, okay, I overpaid by $5,000. It's not the end of the world. And so that was going through my mind too, as opposed to being somewhere like in Chicago or somewhere where you're going to buy a house for $300,000 or $500,000, and if you make a mistake there, it's a little bigger.
Right.
So that was definitely an impact.
So then that was sort of part of your mindset going in on the first deal was just sort of like, these aren't that expensive. Like, don't overthink it.
Exactly. Just take action was the real thing that I kept thinking to myself. If I keep taking action, small little action each day and buy something, then because I was doing a lot of analysis, but I think the first time I took action, I was like, wow, this really excites me. And so I wanted to keep doing that. So that was a key, I think.
Nice. And so really that first deal though, so you bought it real quickly after you graduated. So about how long from maybe reading the Rich Dad Poor Dad book to buying that first deal was it? It's like a few years.
I would say it was probably a year. Like I probably read Rich Dad Poor Dad October, November of my senior year of college. And then I closed on that first deal the next year when I had graduated that May, closed on it by October.
Nice. Yeah, that's quick. What did you do in that year then, just to learn about investing in real estate, buying, or what did you read any more books on real estate eventually? Or
I did end up reading a bunch of those books in the Rich Dad series. I think Cash Flow Quadrant, and I started learning that mindset.
Yeah.
I was an engineer in college, and so I didn't have a lot of exposure to business. And so once I started reading that, I'm like, oh, there's a whole nother way to look at life instead of getting an engineering job for 50 years.
Yeah. I've
So-
read a lot of those books too, around the same age. And what's funny, I don't know where you were getting them from. I was getting them from the library. Like it was still like a little bit before. I guess Amazon was obviously out, but it was like I'd go on vacation to like our cabin or something. We'd go to this like little library up north and getting whatever Robert Kiyosaki books they had, and it was like the right level for someone new too, like super basic.
Exactly.
The cash flow quadrant, that was a good way to think about different ways to make, like how you're making your money and the different, let's call it, quadrants that fits in. And then they did have some real estate books that were great for like very basic. Like,
exactly. And that's like what I just needed the mindset shift, and I think the funny thing is I would go buy the book and I could write it off in my newly made LLC.
Yeah.
So that was the fun thing I had too.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So that when you bought your first deal, you just sort of, there's still so much you didn't know at that point, which we would realize at this juncture.
Yeah.
But you just didn't let that sort of hold you back. Like you had the thought, if you made a bad deal, what was like your mindset? Like
Yeah, I think it was just that the price was kind of so low that even if I made a mistake and it didn't work out, I could still work at my job. I was living at home with my parents, thankfully and luckily that they were so willing to allow me to do that. That allowed me to save money. So I think just the low price point was kind of what allowed me to just keep taking action and say, okay, just try to keep buying stuff,
Yeah.
keep trying to be the owner from Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah, makes total sense. And I had a similar sort of mindset on that point as well. Like I had read maybe 2 books on real estate investing, and the rest were more sort of just general, like I'll call them more like mindset books, like you're talking about, where there's not a strategy on how to buy a property in those. In those, Robert Kiyosaki books, let's say. But my thought was, if I overpay, I just need to make sure that this thing cash flows. And then worst case, I overpaid and I messed up, and then I'll just hold it. And I still am cash flow positive and I'm making money every month. And so I really thought like, okay, some of this valuing the property stuff, I'm still new. I think I got a handle on it. In case I don't, let me really dial in like rents and expenses, because that's something I should be able to figure out. Rents, I can just look around, what are things asking and actually renting for. And then, for expenses, make sure you understand what's going to happen with everything.
Yeah.
Your insurance, how much repairs should be, utilities, etc. So, but there weren't that many expenses on those first deals.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think the valuing
everything.
thing too, it's, if like you said, it doesn't matter what the value is as long as it cash flows. Like you could be totally wrong on the value. You could be off by 25% and still be okay with if you had cash flow.
Yeah, and at least in terms of like a worst case scenario, if that you'd hold it and eventually it'll go up.
Yeah.
Long term that won't work if you just keep overpaying 25% every deal.
Right.
But on the first ones, that's that's what I was thinking too. So it's interesting you said that, because I don't think we've ever talked about that before.
No.
It's something that I think is interesting too. Like you're at that point, it's not like your family does real estate or you were in real estate. And
No. Yeah.
yeah, because everyone we've had, let's say on the podcast so far, if they're doing real estate, as an investor, they had a real estate job before. So, that's where they had some experience. So it's interesting to hear how you did that. Because mine was kind of similar in a way, where I got started before I eventually got a real estate degree, and then also worked at a couple shops. But like I was already investing, so I've had a similar path to you in terms of just let me figure this out, and I can't, and just sort of minimize the downside, get going. Also, so what sort of, you didn't make any excuses. What sort of, like you could have been like, I need more experience or something. Like what what else was going through your mind? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was maybe just ignorance or the fact that I started with single family houses and it's not as overwhelming, I think, as when you start talking multifamily and there's these terms you don't know. And but with a single family house, it's like most people make a purchase of a house in their lifetime, or a lot of people do. And so you could work with the realtor. There wasn't a lot of barriers to entry when it comes to that. So I think that helped, just to be able to say, okay, I'm going to find a realtor. I'm going to say I want an investment property and just do it and just get to the end. Like, I had no idea what the steps were, but getting to the end, I think, was always in my mind. It's like, I want to buy this. This is going to work out. The numbers work out. So let's just figure out how to do it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Where if your first deal was going to be something, this deal was out of town. You're living in
Correct.
Chicago in South Bend. It's in Indiana. How far away is it?
It's about an hour and a half from Chicago or so.
Okay, so yeah, but not like in your neighborhood. So
Right.
that's like a challenge. You overcame that, and then, but it's interesting where because I see people where like their first deal, let's say, and I'm almost like I'm shocked like it like happened, because it'll be some complicated thing. Like, I live in Illinois. I bought something in Las Vegas or something. We need to renovate it and do all these like moving pieces. It's a 100-unit deal. I raised all this money, or it's like, wow, that's amazing. That's her first deal. Like, I don't like, I totally agree with what you're saying, where, start with a house. I started with a 2-unit that was like the price of an average house probably in Madison. Nothing special, a 2-bed and a 3-bed unit. So like that I totally agree with and makes sense. And then you can work your way up, because we'll get to it, but you're doing bigger deals now today, but that's, almost 15 years later.
Right.
So
Right.
cool. Well, yeah, maybe let's walk through other deals then. So what were the next deals like? You bought more houses then?
Yeah, so I bought a few more houses down in South Bend, and they were a little bit cheaper because we went through, obviously the 08, 09 recession, and so they got even more profitable. And so I was excited to do a few of those. And then I kind of took a pause. I changed jobs. My day job changed from consulting, and I started working for a trading firm here in Chicago down at the Board of Trade. And I was very focused on that job at the time. A lot going on with interest rates, and I was trading bonds. So I was very focused on that. I stopped kind of buying properties. I probably had about 4 or 5 houses at that time, all in South Bend.
In what years was this?
This was so the first one at the end of 2007, and then probably through 2010, 2011, I didn't do anything else. I had bought 4 or 5 down there, and just kind of, that was it at the time.
In what years did you buy the 4 or 5?
Between 2008 and 2010.
Great. Okay. Got it. And then, so yeah, that for a second, I thought you said you bought them all in 2007.
Oh,
you took a pause till 2010. I was like, dang. Okay.
No.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. And then, what were you thinking though? Prices went down. You just bought a house or 2.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking they're going down. Like, my logic from before, that this is a cheap enough price. If I make a mistake, it should be okay. Like, well, now it's even cheaper, so let's just keep doing it. And so I was able to buy 4 or 5 more to get to that, 5 to 6 units.
Yeah, that's a really good mindset, because I think what I find interesting is, obviously you want to buy low and sell high, right? But then when the prices actually drop, most people, they get real tentative, like, oh geez, I just bought a house, now it's worth less. Now let me hit the brakes, where instead you're like, well, let me just get 3, 4 more here and it'll be better.
Exactly.
So
I mean, my whole mindset throughout this process was, I want to buy a lot more. And so it's like, as Warren Buffett says, stuff's on sale now.
Yeah.
So, it's not like I was worried about that one that I bought. I was thinking I'm going to buy, 20 was my thought at the time. Like, I'm going to get to 20 units and then retire.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, because I think our biggest year buying, I think, was 2020. And a lot of people ask about that, like, how'd you do it? And it's like, well, you're supposed to buy when like prices are lower, right? So you would want to buy when people were on the sidelines waiting to see how everything shook out with COVID.
Right.
So that's interesting. You were doing that right away. I mean, that was like 13 years in for me, or 15, whatever. So nice. Okay. So then 2010 till about when, let's say, were you not buying? Yeah.
So then I took a break till probably 2015 or 16, where I had 5 or 6 units in South Bend. I'm like, that's my business there in South Bend. And then at the time I was working in this trading job, and then I actually went to business school as part-time. And so I was doing that, like, a lot of time went into that. And it's basically towards the end of business school, I thought to myself, like, my business is so small, like it's 6 units in South Bend. I want to grow this. I need to start taking more action. Kind of that. I think I reread Rich Dad Poor Dad again just to get remotivated. And so then at the end of 2015, I started looking for more properties. And in 2016, I bought another place in South Bend. And then 2017, I bought a duplex. So it was like my first multi-unit dwelling. So I got up to 8 properties in South Bend. And again, just kind of looking at my business, I was thinking, buying 1 to 2 units is just not getting me where I want from a cash flow standpoint and things like that. So I wanted to look for bigger places. And I also, you mentioned that South Bend being a little bit further away. It's out of sight, out of mind, kind of. If I could find something closer to Chicago where I live, then I think I would be more involved. I could grow it quicker. The appreciation opportunity is greater here in Chicago than it would be in South Bend. And so towards the end of 2017, I found a 4-plex in a town, Blue Island, Illinois. And it's interesting. The Blue Island, it's a working class neighborhood.
It's a suburb like in southern Chicago.
Yeah, suburb of Chicago, exactly, to the south.
Yeah.
And the market was very similar to South Bend. In fact, this 4-unit building that I found there was $180,000, 4 units. So it's like $45,000 a unit.
Yeah,
and then you could rent it out for $800 to $900. So it's like, wow, this is like almost a South Bend house, but in Chicago and closer. Nice. So I found this 4-plex in 2017. And then that kind of just the momentum of finding that, I found another 6-unit building in Blue Island as well, and kind of got to that point where, like, okay, I found this 4-plex. I've doubled my unit size in like 6 months, buying that 4-plex and the 6-unit building back to back.
Nice. And one thing I didn't ask you about, and I'm sure people would want to know, is financing. So the first deals that were houses, you mentioned FHA.
Yep.
So that I'm familiar with that, but why don't you want to give? Or all 4 loans were FHA ones? Or?
Just the first one was a 3% down FHA loan. So if I bought it for $98,000, I put like $3,000 down, like pretty much my signing bonus for my first job.
And that one needs to be an FHA. That one you need to owner occupy.
Yes, yeah. So I didn't have any other houses. I had never purchased anything. So I said I'm going to live there for a month and then rent it out, and that was fine.
And then there's loan limits like by county. So what's interesting is if you want to do that in where we're sitting now in Cook County and buy like a 4-unit in like one of the nicer neighborhoods, let's say, you're quite a bit over that limit. But for a house in South Bend, whatever county that's in, this fit perfectly, no issue.
Correct. Yeah, no issue. And I did run into an issue as I started buying more of these houses, and I was financing them. Like I was $40,000 house I would finance. And then eventually banks were like, oh, well, you can only have 5 loans in your name. I'm like, oh, well, wish you'd have told me this earlier, because I'm getting a loan for $23,000 or something. And so eventually I was able to kind of get around that. And I did I have a partner that I bring on that I actually went to grade school with. And so I pulled him into some of the deals, and I was like, okay, can we put the loan in your name? And then that was it. One way we were able to kind of grow it as well.
Yeah, I've heard of people doing that. Because first one was FHA in your name. Mm-hmm. Then the next 3, those were just through like a local bank in South Bend, or from where?
Yeah, local bank in South Bend, 20% down, but 20% down of $45,000 is not much. So I was able to save that with my job. And so that's kind of how we got those first couple.
And then you would have had at a certain point like the 1 FHA loan, and then 3 or 4 bank loans in your name.
Exactly.
And then at some point, if you want to buy more, you could
bring in a partner and buy it in my partner's name.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. And then I've heard of people doing that too, where there's some in the limit. I think it comes from, it's like there's only so many loans in your name. Like that's like comes from Fannie Mae or something, and then they want to resell these loans because they're conforming, like they're 20% down under 400, whatever the jumbo loan cutoff is. Like they're those ones that Fannie wants to insure or
Okay.
buy, or however that works on the back end. Download our 100+ page passive investing guidebook today at riseinvest.com/downloads. Accredited investors can sign up for our multifamily investment opportunities by hitting the Invest Now button on our website. Now back to the show. Buying a 4-unit, that's different than buying a house. So then how'd you finance that one?
So the 4-unit one, my dad is a partner on that one. So I talked to him, and I had just kind of restarted my momentum in my business. I said, we did get a conventional loan on that one as well. So it's under his name. Eventually we were able to transition the deeds into, our LLCs as a protection method, but the loan was under his name. And I just basically did the deal, ran the numbers, and all that. So
Okay, nice.
yeah.
And and did you do that on all the deals eventually, where you initially acquire them individually,
Yes.
and then quit claim deed or whatever method
Exactly.
you used into an LLC?
Everything under, everything under 5 units. So those duplex, the houses, and the fourplex acquired under my name individually, or a partner, whether it's my partner or my father for that fourplex. And then we quit claim deeded them into a series LLC that we had created. So each property is a separate series in that LLC.
Got it. Yeah. And so Illinois has series LLCs. I think some other states do, but it's just people would use those because they're cheaper to open, basically, where you open up the main LLC and then the sub ones, and you would know the terms maybe better than me. It's less money to open them.
Correct.
Is the idea?
Yeah, exactly. And then like at the time, I could have everything under one umbrella, my one name, and then it's like series 1 or series 2, and then I could label it by the property name under that series. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's like those are out, and then if you ask like a lot of attorneys, like, should I use those? They all say don't, because the case law is not very there isn't much on it. So they're like, yeah, you save money, but there's not as much sort of
Protection.
track record of one of the further down. I think it's one of the series LLCs, the ones that the sub ones that are opened. So that's what they say, just to point that out. But I mean,
Good to
worked
know.
fine for you. Same thing with quit claiming to an LLC. You gotta, if you read your loan docs, you're not allowed to transfer the ownership. But it's a weird thing where you ask your lender, and basically they say, yeah, it's fine, do it.
Yeah.
Like everyone does it. So just something to be aware of, at least, where just to check. But worked out fine for me and you. 'Cause
Yeah.
I did the same thing with transferring any of those smaller deals that were just in my name to LLCs eventually. Yeah. But then it's weird to refi. Like, you got to put it back in your name.
You transfer it back.
Yeah. and then you do your refi and you put it back in an LLC. So yeah, it's funny. But then once you get to when I knew where you're going, over 5 units and over,
Yes.
it's a whole different financing environment.
Yes.
But maybe first on the 4 unit. So your dad, so then you just bought it in his name.
Correct. Yeah.
And then the down payment at that point, like, that's a bigger down payment.
Yeah. Yeah. A little bit bigger down payment. So, so we did, and I'm trying to remember exactly how we split the down payment. He did come with some money, and he does participate obviously in the profits and that deal. So he brought some money, I brought some money, and we put the loan under his name, closed on it. And that one actually, just because at the time we bought it, it's been the longest one. That one's appreciated substantially. Rents have gone up. So that one's doing pretty well.
Great. Yeah. And then, so then with, let's say then, because your dad, he just has, like, what does he do? Then let's maybe for some context where
he's an attorney. He does medical malpractice attorneys. He defends doctors in malpractice cases. So he's not really involved in real estate. Although I did come to find out later that his father was an attorney as well, but also did some real estate stuff back, a long time ago. And he actually he was like a developer on
really?
a couple houses, like in different parts of Chicago, or different buildings in Chicago. So I learned that later after I'd already gotten involved.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, my dad's dad, who I never met because he had a heart attack before I was born, but he owned a couple restaurants. This is in like northern Wisconsin, and then he wanted to like build condos next and like houses up there, like start building like housing. And when he passed away, there were no buyers for the longest time. for this bar restaurant that was closed down. And then eventually one of the Indian tribes up there came and bought it. And then there's a casino on it now.
Oh,
so
really?
it's funny where, that's like the only Brenneman's real estate deal,
Yeah.
if you will, is selling that off eventually. So, and there's no buyers, but if they could get their casino approved off reservation, then there's like, we can pay up, and they did. So I
Interesting.
think that,
Okay.
so Turtle Lake Casino, check it out, everybody.
Okay, all
Yeah. So that is, but yeah, that's interesting, but it wasn't like he was, doing real estate and he wasn't, maybe put in like 10 grand in that deal or something, but wasn't, you were still setting it up. And
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
but I've noticed that too, where like you got to be really resourceful. So just to like point that out, where, okay, it sounds almost like, oh, this is sort of simple in retrospect. Like you start with a house, then you buy a few more, then go to 4-unit, but like these aren't in the state you live in, even to get it to a price point where you can buy them now in the cash flow. You're living at home, like, and then to do a 4-unit, you're partnering with 1 or 2 more people and finding unique ways to finance them, because you've maxed out your loan count.
Yep.
And then, so like, that's one thing too, where I've, seen the same thing a million times with the people that are good at this, like or really any business, you got to be resourceful.
Yeah.
So that's important to point out. So then let's just keep going through the deals. I think this is a good way for people to learn.
Sure. Yeah. So I did the fourplex, and at that time also I started listening to Bigger Pockets, the podcast, and I was just eating up the podcast. Like literally, I think I would listen to a podcast every day because I had started, they were on probably episode 200 at the time. So I had 200 podcasts I could get through. And so it was just so interesting to hear about what other people were doing and how people were able to scale their business. And so I found that six unit deal, and I knew that deal now, the financing is a little different. I can get financing based on the deal. It's not necessarily based on me. And they're still going to underwrite me, but they're going to look at the deal a little bit more closely. And so I was able to I financed that one with US Bank. I had a local guy, showed him the deal. I showed him, here's what the cash flow looks like, and he liked it. And I was able to structure that with I think, so actually that one, my dad and my partner, all 3 of them are involved in that one as well. And I came to them, said, we're going to scale this, we're going to grow it. And so it's on this little block in Blue Island. And that was my first kind of multifamily deal where I was able to, I set up a separate LLC. I financed it in that name. They underwrote the deal with, all 3 of us, myself and the 2 partners, my dad and my other partner, on that deal, and closed that kind of right away after that fourplex.
Nice. So we're still in 2015.
2015. Yeah.
And how many units was this deal?
6 units.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Because so the difference is on a 4-unit to a 6-unit, it was really just the financing.
The financing was the main thing. Yeah, exactly. The price per unit was about that same. So I talked about the fourplex was $180,000, so about $45,000 a unit. Similar thing for the sixplex. Maybe it was at that time up to $50,000 a unit, but still around that price, $50,000 a unit. I could rent it out for $900 a month.
Nice. Yeah, and that's I've heard that before too, where now you have these 5 units and over, like they're really underwriting the deal. How they underwrite you is really just looking at, more from a like a personal guarantee standpoint, not like, on the 4 units, they want to look at your income, and they do some funny thing with like the rents. Like we can count that as 75% towards your income, but we use 100% of the expenses. But then once you get to a 5 unit, they look at the deal. Does this cash flow, usually they want to see the net income from the property be 125% of what your loan payment is. So if you hear like a DSCR of a 120 to 125, like that's what they're talking about, where they want to see the deal do that. And then the people running it, they want to see they have net worth and liquidity to, step in and help it if needed, the deal, and then also experience. So it's interesting. One hurdle you would have had if you just started with the 6 unit, you already know this, but like it would have been like, well, you haven't done any deals before.
Yeah.
I know you guys, you got the team here with 3 people and the liquidity to do it, but there's no experience here. So it's interesting. So you got to work your way up, or if you want to start at a 6 unit, one of the partners would have to been someone who's already been doing this for a while.
Yes.
But instead, I mean, you're applying and you have, at that point, 7-8 years of experience investing. So that's like that box is checked. And now, did it seem easier buying the 6 unit than the other ones, or?
I was nervous about what you just talked about, them saying, oh, well, you don't have multifamily experience. And I did some reading and I thought maybe that was going to be an issue, but the lender at US Bank said, no, you're experienced. Like, you've done this before. You guys have a portfolio.
Yeah. You have a 4 unit as well.
Yeah.
And that's a multi-unit deal. So yeah, it's just a lending thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But I will say, yeah, it was buying that 6 unit was easier than definitely my first deal ever. So it progressively got easier. I sort of understood the process a little bit more. I didn't understand how they would underwrite the deal. But I learned, like, the lender was great because he just was like, okay, here's what they're going to ask about. Here's what you have to show. And once I sent them, basically the offering memorandum from the broker that had it on the market, the guy was like, okay, we'll enter our numbers into our system and tell you if we like it. He called me back the next day. He's like, this is great. The numbers are pencil out. So
Great.
great.
Yeah, I mean, hearing you talk about this, I would say the easiest size deals to buy, if we're talking multifamily, it's actually 5 or 6 units because of this. You get the financing where there's just sort of, they look at the deal more so where you don't have to worry about, okay, whose name is it in or whatever. You're just going to put it in an LLC to start. Like, to me, that's like actually the easiest size deal, let's say, which is interesting. When you get to that size, you don't think this will be easier. You think, oh geez, this will be harder now.
Yeah.
And then obviously once you go up from there, I'd say the deals are harder just because there's more work to do, more moving pieces.
Yeah.
Numbers start getting bigger. But yeah, keep going. What else?
Yeah. So then I had that 6 unit deal, and then again I was listening to Bigger Pockets often, kind of staying motivated, learning a ton through this process. I ended up buying a 6 unit building directly next to the one I bought in 2015. The following year, it went on the market, and we right away talked to the broker and said, we own the building next door, we want to buy it. And so we bought that one. And then I still was thinking, like, I'm not scaling fast enough. I want to keep this growing. And so I thought Bigger Pockets introduced me to the idea of a syndication. So basically pooling together money of friends and family was my thought process, and buying something bigger. And it would allow me to maybe collect a fee up front to, be something that could be scalable, that I could make a little bit more money on. And then plus I could retain a percentage of the ownership for just doing all the work, not even bringing cash. And so I came up with this business plan that I wanted to start a syndication and to buy. And at the time I was like, okay, I want to buy a 12 unit building, double the size, or bigger, 12 to 20 was kind of my thought process. And so the first step, I thought, well, I'm kind of out of money. I bought these 6 unit buildings back to back. How can I get a little bit more money? And how can I also build this investor group that would want to be part of my syndication? And so I came up with this idea to do some flipping in 2018 and 2019. And so I put together a little business plan, and I said, I also was networking, and I met somebody at a meetup that was doing some flipping kind of on the south side of Chicago near Midway. And so he had talked to me. He's like, oh yeah, we bought this house for like $50,000, and we put in 50 or 60, and we sold it for 150 and made 40 grand. And I'm like, okay, like that sounds like a good way to make some chunks of cash. I can get some more money for the syndication, and I could potentially find some investors that would want to invest in that flip with me. So I was working with this guy that I had met, and we did that same thing. We bought a house that had been vacant for a while, and I pitched this to a couple friends and said, if you give me whatever chunk of money, give me $25,000, give me $30,000, $50,000, I will pay you 12% interest, and I'm going to use that money to buy this house and buy all the materials and the labor to do this flip. And then I'll pay you out the interest when I sell the house. And that's exactly what we did. We bought this house for roughly $50,000 near Midway. We put in about $60,000 and sold it for $160,000. And with taxes and everything, we netted like $30,000. And so I'm like, that's a great chunk of money. And so I did, and then I was able to pay out the investors that had given me some money, their 12%. They were excited. They got their money back in 4 months, 5 months, however long it took. And I did that like 5 or 6 more times in 2018 and 2019 just to earn some chunks of cash. And then my investors were like, this is awesome. Like, can I do another one? I'm making 12% quickly. I'm getting my money back quickly. So that is kind of the first step to getting to my syndication. I earned some chunks of money, fostered this group of investors. And then I decided, okay, first of all, flipping is a lot of work. It's
That's what I was thinking when you were saying this. I was like, hey, now we're flipping houses while we have a job. Okay.
Right. So I had this partner that I met through networking and basically at some meetups. He was doing this type of stuff full time. And so he didn't put any cash in these deals, but I gave him a third of all the profits. I'm like, you don't have to put any cash. Can you help me run this? Can you help me organize the contractors? And so he basically did a lot of the work, that being in person.
Got it.
With no cash in front. And then we'd sell the house and he'd get a third of the profits.
Right. Got it.
So I was able to kind of just figure out how to get it done. While I was at work, he was doing that stuff.
Yeah. So then you get 2/3 over a 12.
Exactly.
Because you're paying out 12 to the investors, and then he gets a third for doing the day-to-day on those.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Exactly.
So then how many of those did you do?
We did six total flips, and to varying degrees of success. I would say the most we made was like $45,000 on one of the flips, and then we probably made like $13,000 on one of them, which was not great. But altogether, it was definitely a success. I thought about trying to scale that type of business up a little bit more to do like 10 flips a year or something, and it got overwhelming with the amount of work, and then the taxes that come out when you sell these properties. It's like the transfer taxes, but then income tax because it's ordinary income. Yeah. So it was just it was great to build that group of investors and to earn some chunks of money, but I didn't think it was a long-term thing I wanted to do.
Yeah, and then at that point you had roughly how many units? Because now you have 96 today.
96 today, so. Yeah. I probably had like 24 units at the time with the 2 6-unit buildings, a 4-unit, some of the stuff in South Bend, 24 units around then.
So last 3 years, roughly, you've got 70 more units. So take me through that.
Yeah. So I did the 6 flips in 2018 and 2019, and then paid out the investors their 12%. And then they were kind of emailing me saying, when's the next flip? How can I get involved in more long-term stuff? And so I said, okay, now I'm going to do this syndication. I'm going to find a 12 to 20 unit building and bring in a few investors. And I structured it with me owning. I was able to give them a nice, healthy return, upper teen return, 18, 19% return based on the numbers. I did a whole underwriting process, and I was able to retain 40% of ownership in this building that I found. It was a 16-unit building, also in Blue Island, and presented the deal to the investors. They saw they were going to, get this 18, 19% return, and I was going to pay out cash flows every quarter, which I am doing. Nice. So they all signed up. They said, let's do it. Let's try it. And so we bought this 16-unit building there. I built a whole, I had hired this attorney to build out a deal structure and an agreement that they all signed. And then I went back to that same lender that did my first, the 2 6-unit buildings that I had previously bought, and said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to do this syndication. And the cool thing about that is that if you don't own over 20%, you don't have to be involved in the underwriting process. So it was still a limited number of people. I think one of the investors had to go through the underwriting and be, looked into a little bit more in more detail. But I was able to kind of mostly make it passive for these investors. They own this chunk of real estate long term. Every quarter, I write up a little email about how things are going, and I pay them out their cash flows from that quarter, just the cash flows from the operations, and just went from there.
Nice. And the profit split or cash flow split is 60/40 on that.
Exactly. Yeah. So 60/40. So 60% to the investors and then 40% to me. And then I actually did come with some cash, a limited amount of cash. So I actually have a little bit more than 40% on that.
Yep. Makes sense. And then you had, and then the investors get their money back just when we sell or refi, like that initial money they put in, or.
Exactly. Yeah. That's written into the agreement where if we sell or refi, that they get their money back. And that I think I also have it written in the agreement that, they will get their money back before I take any profit. So if for some reason something crazy happens, I would forfeit any of my 40%. I would just give them their money back. I think I did have a clause in there.
Okay. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, and then that makes sense. So then if those quarterly distributions, then those are more like a return of their capital first then?
Correct. First. Exactly. Yeah. That's how it's structured.
Okay. Got it. So they get their money back first and then you start splitting 60/40.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Then if they never got, then they'll have their money back first before you get.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense. And then, and what you were saying about with the underwriting that I get. So unpack that a little. So if any owner is over, I think it's 25%, and it's a bank loan, they need to do some, this for like bank compliance for different, anti-terrorism and like money laundering laws and things where they need to know who is this owner. Mm-hmm. So then that's where you're saying there's some extra work for them. Cause now you're filling out forms saying who you are. Here's my name and social and address. And
exactly.
I'm signing this.
And what I did is there were a couple people of investors that were really interested in investing with me, but they didn't want to do that work. Like they would ask them to fill out a personal financial statement and like send in a bunch of like their taxes. And a couple of my investors were like, do I really have to do that? I'm like, okay, no, how about you take 24% ownership and then you're under that threshold and then you still, you have the cash for that. And then, so that is kind of how I structured for a couple of the people that wanted to give more, but I just kind of limited them so they didn't have to go through those extra steps.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And then for the personal guarantee on a loan like that, who was that? Yeah,
the personal guarantee on the loan was under my name because I was, my partner, Mark, he's also involved. So he owns more than 25% as well. So he was also part of the personal guarantee. So Mark and I were able to go through that process, no problem.
Right. So then as a syndication, as an investor, you're just putting in money. Yes. You don't need to spend any time on the deal or be on the loan. Like you're putting in money, and then that's because it's interesting. Like real estate, people talk about being a passive investment. Like it's not passive at all if you're the owner or the person running the deal. But if you're able to just invest in a syndication like that, it is totally passive. You just put in your money and make what it makes.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say I've had a couple of my investors that I've talked to. They're like, "Oh, this is the best investment I have. I don't have to do anything. It's not going down. Like I'm still getting the same cash flows every quarter. Then like whereas the stock market, everything's gone down in value, and I'm losing money there." He's like, "Can I do more deals?" I'm like, "Well, I'm trying to find them." So.
Yeah, I know. I joke with people here, like when I get older, I just want to be like one of our investors. Right. You put in money and then you get paid. So where it's a lot of work doing these deals where I was almost gonna say like there's like it's the least passive investment you could make, but that's not like as the sponsor, but that's not true. Like owning a restaurant or something would be more day to day. You could have problems just at all hours running a restaurant. So there's businesses that take way more work than real estate, but it's a lot of work. So then if you can invest in something and people charge a incentive fee or success fee, like you're talking about. If you make a certain amount, like then you get a share of the profits, but that's after you have your money back. And you share in a syndication, you share in the tax benefits of investing in real estate too. So I'd imagine they haven't been allocated a ton of taxable income.
Exactly right. So that was another benefit. It's like I'm going to, if somebody gave me $50,000, I would, my estimate might be like, okay, you're going to receive $5,000 of cash flow this year, but the K1 that you receive from this syndication is going to indicate that you made $500. So you might pay tax on $500, or maybe nothing, or maybe negative money, depending on a couple factors. But so they didn't. I think a lot of the investors didn't understand that benefit fully until they got their first K1. They're like, oh wow, like you actually gave me money, but this is showing me a loss, and I can write that off potentially, depending on their situation, against earned income they had that year.
Yeah, and or other real estate deals they're in that might be kicking off income. And also, because the cash you receive from that deal, that's the income you pay tax on is different than cash received. The income is the, your taxable income is the, the revenue minus your taxable expenses. And there's additional things in there that are not things you pay in cash. Like you get to depreciate the building. So you're taking an expense for that you don't actually pay. Mm-hmm. And everything you pay out, from property taxes to mortgage interest, it's deductible. So then those are two different numbers, and people don't really grasp that sometimes, where you got, even when they're in the deals where they go, I got $5,000, like you're saying, and I got allocated only $500 of income. I don't get it.
Yeah.
But it's two separate things. Like you can, like your cash flow and your taxable income are different numbers.
Yes. Yeah.
So, that's definitely one of the benefits to investing in real estate, and then investing long term. So since you're not owning it for like a couple months, like a flip, when you go sell, it's a long term capital gain. Yeah. And you're paying a lower tax rate.
Exactly. Yeah.
As well. So it's very tax efficient. And then obviously options from there to like defer your gain. So where you can do a 1031 tax deferred exchange if you want to go into another deal, and then you don't pay your taxes yet. You then would pay it when you sell the new deal, and you can keep doing that basically forever. Yeah. So a lot of strategies around that. And then you could hold it till you pass away, and then you get a basis step up. And so there's a lot of things you can do. But nice. Well, then I think, what sort of tips do you have for someone working, let's say full time, and they want to invest in real estate?
Yeah. I mean, I would say it's definitely possible. I think having the team, and one thing I'll say too, which you didn't ask about, is that these properties now, I have a property manager. I have a guy that I pay who basically just works for me.
You self-manage these?
So he manages them for me. He collects the rent. He knows all the tenants. Like I don't know any of the tenants. I've never met any of them. He also manages this handyman guy that I know. And so he'll say, go to this unit and repair this bathroom. And so he does a lot of it. And he's also a broker, so he'll bring me new deals too. So he's kind of a one-man show for me. Nice.
So tip number 1, don't do the property management yourself.
Don't do the property. Yeah. Okay. Find somebody that you can trust that will do it for you. I talk to him every day. He'll text me or I'll call him and just give me the updates and say, here's the problems, here's the good things. I'm raising rents. Here's something that we have to look at from a rehab standpoint. So finding at least a guy or a team or of people that can manage it for you is definitely a tip.
Great. What else comes to mind?
I would say taking action. Like I go to work every single day and work really hard in my day job, but I also do something in my real estate business every day, whether it's update my books or just look at my bank accounts. Like has more rent come through. And so it's like always on my mind. And so I kind of regret taking basically from 2010 to 2015 completely off and not really doing anything during that time. If I had just done one deal, during that time, I feel like I would have had more momentum quicker. So I would say just taking action every day on something is helpful.
Yeah. And something that to unpack from your story, I mean, number 3, like make sacrifices. I mean, how long did you live at home with your parents then after college?
I lived at home for a good 3.5 years until I moved. And then I moved in with my partner, Mark, who's a partner with my real estate stuff. So we talk real estate all the time. And so I lived at home, made those sacrifices, and even living with a roommate then with Mark for a while. And just trying to, I try not to take any money out of my real estate business and just let it organically snowball. I have this day job. I can for sure live on that and save money and keep all my real estate money continuing to compound.
Nice. Yeah. Cause just to reiterate that, cause you had, you had a nice job, and a lot of people, step 1 is, get a expensive apartment. Step 2 is get a BMW or whatever, but you waited on all that stuff. Yeah. So I want to point that out, because that's a common thread I see with people who able to do something like this, where they're not scared to take action or make sacrifices.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I would say too, like the one other thing I'll mention is the podcast, like as soon as podcasting became popular, it was huge for me because I could listen to it on the move. I could listen to it while I'm working out and just really stay motivated and learn a ton. Like some of these podcasts that are out there, I mentioned Bigger Pockets podcast. I probably listened to every episode of that podcast, maybe.
Wow.
And just hearing what different people, that's how I learned about what syndication was and learned about how people can go from owning a house or two or three to making it, more of like something like a legit business. I mean, so it's possible, and people do it.
Yeah. Oh, great.
You've done it.
Yeah. I think that's a great point to go out on, so that's great. Yeah. I've even today, I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts or audiobooks. I have a business and a kid. Like I got plenty of stuff to do, but so I don't have time, I feel like, to sit down and read, but you definitely got time to listen to something while you work out or drive to work or whatever. So as busy as we are, we made time for it. So
exactly.
Well, great. Well, yeah. Well, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Good job with everything.
Thank you. And congratulations on all this success here. I mean, this is so cool. Just to be in this studio and around your whole team that you've built out. I mean, I know it's going to continue too. So great job.
Yeah. Thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah. And this studio, it's actually like, this is our office. And then we just have people work from home on the podcast days. So, but nice. Well, yeah. How can listeners, viewers get in touch with you? Let's say they are interested in investing in a syndication with you or just getting in touch. What should they do?
So my LinkedIn profile is just Michael Hennig. It'll say managing consultant with Gallup on the LinkedIn profile. But my email address, I'll just give it to you. It's mhennig14, MHENNIG 14 @gmail. So shoot me an email if you want to catch up. And even if it's for a networking event or just want to talk more about real estate, I'd love to connect with people.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for joining us on the Rise and Invest podcast. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you enjoy your podcasts. If you'd like to dive even deeper into real estate investing, check out our company's website, riseinvest.com, where we have numerous free resources and information that can help both active and passive real estate investors. Our 100-plus page passive investing guidebook, our trends report, and our blog are all available on our website. If you are an accredited investor, you can get started today as a passive investor in our multifamily investment opportunities by hitting the Invest Now button on our website.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of Drew Brenneman and guests as of the date of recording and do not purport to reflect the views or opinions of Rise Invest Holdings LLC and its subsidiaries. The views and opinions are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon or deemed as investment or tax advice or an offer to buy or sell securities, and the speaker cannot be held responsible for any direct or incidental loss incurred by applying any of the information offered.